Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. I was mentioning to a few people a couple minutes ago, I expect today will be a sparser showing than usual at the monthly call, given that this is summer vacations are winding down. So I appreciate everybody that is on this call for taking the time to do so. The agenda for today is first we'll start off with allowing new members to introduce themselves. I've got a couple announcements about the calendar of events that has some major changes from our last month's meeting. I'm going to spend a fair amount of today's call talking about our chat room, which is now ready to be shared. And I'm going to show people how it works, and with the ask that this group test it out over the next month, so that maybe a month or so from now, we can launch it out to a broader community. Dan Silva is unable to make today's call, so I'm going to give a brief update for him about the clinical forecast advisory team and CTSM Consortium. Another brief update about improving visibility and access to information across the supply chain update, which prior to last month we were calling RealTime Inventory, but now we've sort of migrated in terms of where our focus is going to be on that. More about that then. If there's more time after that, we'll have an open forum. So any questions, challenges, problems that you're working on that you would like others to provide their thoughts, ideas, opinions on, here's an opportunity to do so. And then an announcement of our next meeting. I know a couple of you need to jump off early. So just a quick thing about next meeting is it's going to be 2 months from now, because yours truly will finally be taking some time off next month. Okay, so with that said, I see that we have a few new members on today's call, and just as an aside, I received some feedback shortly around the time of our last call that it would be nice to have some more representation from some of our smaller and medium-sized companies. So I've reached out to a few. I think today a couple of them are on the call, and I expect that there'll be another 3 or 4 additional people in representing smaller companies on the next call that weren't able to make it today. So with that said, Amy, I think you were the first one on the line of the new members. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amy Thompson. I'm Senior Director of Supply Chain at Eidos Therapeutics currently. We are a small virtual company, though we are getting bigger every day, it seems like. I think we're up to about 90 people total, but that's what happens when you add commercialization teams. So yeah, we're just small, one product in the clinic. Previous to that was at Gilead Sciences for about 7 years. Worked on a lot there, and prior to that, miscellaneous biotechnology companies in different roles from laboratory to manufacturing. So glad to be here and interested in your group.
All right, thank you, Amy. Scott, I saw you on the line.
Hi, everyone. Scott Sabalvero. Currently, I'm with Amgen, but previously, before that, I was leading the supply chain at 5 Prime, which was acquired by Amgen back in April. And prior to that, I was working with Bill at BioMarin. So, hi, everyone.
Thanks, Scott. Jimmy Long, I think I saw you.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Phil. So my name's Jimmy Long. I'm the implementation manager at Biocom California. I'm part of the purchasing group. So I'm here representing the purchasing group, and we're a medium-sized, small-sized life science GPO that you guys are probably familiar of. But nice to meet everybody. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Did I miss anybody? Okay, thank you. And just an aside, um, as Jimmy mentioned, he's here representing Biocom. And it's worth pointing out that while we've often said that one of the main benefits of this steering committee is help to identify and disseminate best practices, industry standards, and so forth. There's other advantages, and a big one of that is networking. And Biocom, for those of you who aren't aware, is a consortium of purchasing primarily contracts, primarily in the California area. They have over 1,500 company members. So if you're a biotech company in California, in all likelihood, your company's a member. And one of the opportunities that we have in front of us is to help Biocom expand their contracts beyond their traditional ones, which are, for example, VWR, the Fisher and FedEx and office supplies, to clinical supply chain contracts, which for all intents and purposes doesn't exist in this industry. So we can be pioneers in that area to help facilitate that. So with that said, calendar of events, the big change from last month, and hopefully you've all heard this, is that the annual conference that was scheduled for October 20th, due to the pandemic, has been pushed out to March 21st. Devendra, I don't know if there's anything more. I assume we don't have a specific date yet.
That's very true. We are looking at the 24th of March as the likely date. We will advise you very, very shortly.
Okay, thank you. Your audio is not coming in that great, Devendra. Okay, the other change from last month is the clinical forecasting webinar that's being hosted by BSMA and 4G. So JP, who's on vacation this week, isn't here to put a plug in for it, but I'm hoping that all of you have received an invitation for this event. I'm not sure how many of you attended the first one that he did on May 11th, but I thought it was very informative. And I expect this one will be at least as good as that one, because not only will it provide information based on the input and feedback from his last one, but I believe he has among some guest speakers, Devendra, and who was that guest speaker? Sorry, I don't hear you.
I had put myself on mute. So what was the question again?
The JP's webinar, he has a special guest.
Yes, it's Steve Awad, who's from Johnson & Johnson, who has actually implemented a demand-driven forecasting system at Janssen, which is a division of Johnson & Johnson. And that should be a very revealing case study for all of us. And the entire presentation in my mind is a new way to look at planning and forecasting rather than being supply driven to be demand driven. So I think it'll be worth your time to attend that roundtable and raise your questions and get some answers.
Yeah, so thank you, Devendra. And as I said, if you haven't seen the information to be able to connect with that to that event, please email me and I will send you the details. Thank you. Okay. One of the things that I'm hoping everybody has is already aware of is that our steering committee has a website, and the blue link here is a link to the steering committee website, which, if you're not already aware, shows the steering committee charter, names and information about its steering committee members. That's where I place the slides and recording from each of these monthly meetings. And eventually where we will store white papers on such things as industry best practices. But what I wanted to do today is to spend a little time talking about the chat room, which you see in red. And I'm going to steer you through some of it to give you an idea of what it's all about. So first, before I click onto it, you will see when I get to it that there's different, what I'm calling forums, which are subject matters that I've identified that I thought might be a useful way to start off this chat room. And you'll see them here. There's clinical supply forecasting and demand planning, IXRS, systems and technology, process and best practices, blinded studies, direct-to-patient challenges and solutions, clinical packaging and labeling, drug accountability and reconciliation, and cold chain logistics. Now, that's not to say this is the be-all, end-all, and it's going to stop here. One of the things I'm going to be asking for you to do after I give you this orientation today is to give me your feedback about the chat room, whether or not the subject matter or forums, if you will, cover the areas that you are interested in, and if there are any others you would like me to put in place. So with that said, I'm going to just spend a couple minutes here and show you what the screen looks like. So this has already gone to the website, and by the way, when I sent out the slides yesterday, I sent you a second attachment, which provides instructions on what you need to do to be able to start using this. So don't worry if you don't get it all down right now over the next couple minutes. But the first thing you would do is that you would register into, you go
Hey,
onto
Bill,
this
this is Luke.
link.
I don't know if you're actually sharing the website screen because we still just see the deck. So I don't know if maybe you shared the deck and not the screen.
Oh, let me see. You don't see something now that shows, it says forums, members, recent posts on the top?
We do not, no.
Oh, okay. I wonder why. Okay, then I will.
You may just be sharing an app instead of your screen. You might just have to unshare, like stop sharing and start again. That could be
All right, I'll try that. Thanks for pointing that out, Luke.
Here to help, baby.
All right. Now, can anybody see anything?
We still just have the slide deck.
Yep.
Okay. Then trust me on this. The chat room's great. You'll love it. And the instructions are, I think, pretty clear on what you need to do in order to A, register, B, ask a question, give an answer or sort of just log in to see what other people have been asking or responding to. So again, I apologize, I'm not able to share this. So I'm going to get out of this. And Malu, I see you snuck into the meeting.
Yep. Hey, Bill. Hi, everyone.
Malu has been there for the last 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I've been here all along, Bill.
I doubt that. All right, am I back on showing a slide that says steering committee website?
Nope.
Wow.
Bill, I would forget doing that. I had the same problem a week ago with Zoom. Oh, there you go. Let's see. No.
Yeah, we can see the slides now, Bill.
Good. Okay. Do I dare? I'm gonna.
Stay with the slides.
Okay. So just to get off this subject, then this is the link here that will bring you to the chat room. And there's a separate attachment I sent yesterday that will provide instructions on how to register, how to ask questions, give answers, and read what information other people have provided. So it will be asking for each of you to create your own password, and there are no restrictions for anybody to take advantage of this chat room. But I, as I said in the beginning, I'm asking that each of you provide, start using it over the next month. Give me your input, and we will continue to make improvements as we gain more experience and input from all of you. Okay, can everybody see the slide that says clinical forecasting update?
Yes.
Good. All right, so back on course. Okay, not a lot to update from our last monthly meeting, other than at the last meeting, JP, who lives and breathes clinical forecasting, asked to be part of this this advisory group. They have their next meeting, I believe it's next week. So while they were originally working behind the scenes to plan an event for the October conference, we will either A, continue down that path with this group, or B, they may elect to have a webinar sometime during the fall or winter, and then a subsequent event in the March conference. So we'll leave it up to Dan's leadership for that group to decide which of those options he chooses. But as said during the last call, their focus is going to be talking about stochastic versus deterministic planning, and more to come when he's here for the next meeting, and with whatever additional information they come up with during their next prep meeting, which I said is next week. So if any questions on this, or if anyone else is interested in joining this advisory team, let me know now or let me know later. Okay, thank you. Most of you are aware that one of our members is a CTSM Consortium that's spearheaded by 10th Pin, Roche, and SAP. They now are probably close to 15 or 20 members in their consortium. You'll see there some of the most recent members that are in the process of being onboarded. One update from the last meeting is that there's been a flock of interest, mostly from the larger companies, looking for demos of this new solution. Given the number of requests to see the demo, they're in the process of putting together a more formal demo environment so that they can start communicating this technology solution more easily into a broader customer base. Some of you know that BSMA is a member of this consortium in the sense that we're providing advisory, which right now has included meetings with the other members, talking about such things as GS1, serialization, labeling, validation, adaptive trials, blinding, and so forth. So what we've been in the process of trying to do is to incorporate the needs, wants, inputs of the BSMA membership, many of which are not ready to implement a technology solution, but are rather planning on Excel or possibly using some other solution other than SAP. For example, I know a couple are using Oracle, so that we, along with this consortium, can help drive the industry standard to one that makes sense, which we acknowledge will be different for the smaller startups than it would be for the more mature organizations. But in all cases, it starts with having industry standards that are based on processes, not technology, so that when they are ready to implement a technology, it's more of a seamless transition and not one that needs to be customized for a specific organization. So the first release of this new solution for SAP is still scheduled for April 2022, but these consortium meetings that I've just described are intended to reflect the input of future releases, which, as I said, will include the input that we through BSMA, you through this consortium if you're a member, or through us if you're not, so that eventually it can be what we want it to be. So any questions on this? Okay. The other advisory team that has been working behind the scenes, which before we were calling the RealTime Inventory team, and now we're calling the Improving Visibility and Access to Information Across the Clinical Trial Network, is represented by the members you see on this slide. Their vision, which hasn't changed for the overall group, and again, this is a key vision for the 10th Pin Roche SAP Consortium is through a common process and model align our industry to achieve seamless collaboration information exchange throughout the supply network. Well, so obviously for people using the SAP solution, this seamless collaboration information means using their technology to get access to information, in many ways, real-time access to information in order to make better and more informed decisions. Our objective is different in the sense that our objective is to educate their members and our suppliers about the vision, including the benefits and problems it solves, to sort of strike a call to action that motivates us to support and act on this vision. Meaning, the more that we can get the industry to understand and work towards this idea of collaboration and information exchange from the end-to-end network, not just internally within organizations, but with your suppliers and their suppliers and your IXRS solutions and EDC and distributors and so forth. And I know for many of us, that doesn't mean using a technology, but some other means of sharing information. And this group will help point the way for us to achieve that. So I've already shared with you at the last monthly meetings, some of the things that they have done. So for example, we've been extracting information with the assistance of somebody that BSMA has contracted, Robbie Singh, who's on the call, to be able to quantify the problems with having lack of visibility of information. Case in point, 55% of drugs produced for clinical studies don't get used. We're also working to come up with examples of companies or individuals who've come up with solutions that have addressed some of these shortcomings. And we're currently working with Schrocken, who is one of the supplier members of BSMA, on an end-to-end clinical trial process map, which will show the inputs and the outputs to help supply chain and clinical operations professionals recognize the importance of tracking and sharing information for optimizing clinical trials. So just to elaborate on that, I know many of us can be faced with getting information on a timely basis, if at all, with our friends from clinical operations. And a lot of it might be because they don't understand why we need it. Or some might say that as long as they told you how many patients and what the patient number what the patient enrollment rate is, you shouldn't be bothering them for additional information beyond that. It should be a slam dunk. You should know how much drug to make and have it ready for them. And I think we all know that it's much more complicated than that, but perhaps they don't understand why it's more complicated than that. So with the output of what we're working on with Schrocken should help us and them know what are the key drivers to making demand planning and supply planning and decisions, where to put it, how much, when to ship, and so forth. Because there's an awful lot that goes on that's dynamic in nature, that if you don't track and measure, you're not making perhaps the best decision on your supply plan. So like I said about the clinical forecasting group, this team will either A, provide this information at the March event, or B, have something shown between now and then as well as a continuation of it in March. So more to come on that. Any questions? Okay. Next meeting is will be the third Thursday of October. So we've got some time on our hands. So before we sign off, are there any questions or topics that somebody might be interested in sharing with the team that we might be interested in talking about? Can I pick on somebody? Malou, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Sorry, I want to, since you know how much I like to pick on you when you
That's
were
why
at
I come.
BioMarin. So there's been some positive announcements about Beijing with some, with respect to some products that, commercially speaking, are on the horizon. From clinical supply chains perspective, what has been the biggest challenge that you're looking to overcome?
Well, I think it's, really similar to the challenges that we encountered at BioMarin, and what I assume, is pretty common across industry, right? So as we commercialize the clinical products, I think at Beijing, it's a little bit of a smoother transition than it was at BioMarin. I think at BioMarin, it was still very new. But the difference at Beijing is we brought in some folks who were very well experienced in product launches. So I would totally recommend that when transitioning from clinical to commercial, is to really bring in the experience that you need, rather than just to try to figure it out as you go, at least to help provide guidance.
So that's helpful to hear, Malou. If I understand, just based on input from Rutesh, who is from Beijing on our steering committee, but unable to attend today, I know that he, among others, are working on implementing a technology solution, and it sounds like the SAP 10th pin solution, given that they're being onboarded with that group. So, help me understand then the challenges of getting close to commercial launch and not yet having anything other than a manual process to help do the demand and supply planning.
Well, it's a lot of collaboration for sure. So there's Rutesh, as he mentioned, is working to implement a system, right? Basically SAP, and there's I guess a core team that's meeting with each of the clinical supply leads, as we call it, and really identifying all of the items, all the finished goods, all the drug product items, all of that to input into the system. Until that system is up and running and it's a little bit more automated, everything is manual. We don't even have item numbers just yet. So it's all on spreadsheets, all on Excel. And Excel is great because it's super flexible, and you can really customize it to your needs. What was helpful is we actually were able to create templates that everyone uses. I don't think we got to that point at BioMarin. I think instead we went with the tool. Gosh, I can't believe I forgot the name of it. ClinApps. That's it.
ClinApps,
Yeah. So I think ClinApps would have been more useful if we could have used it more to what it was designed to do. But I think we were really just using it to to forecast, and the challenge was we were never able to put actuals in there, right? So every time we had to put actuals, we had to create a new one. So that was really challenging. With Excel, again, you can customize it so much that it's able to support our needs more than what ClinApps was able to do with the way we're using it.
Okay.
But yeah, until SAP is up and running, it's all fairly manual, with Excel really being the foundation.
Okay, so thanks, Malou. I know some things have changed about ClinApps in the sense that now the ClinApps forecast is put into, in their case, the Oracle Demantra forecast. So now commercial and clinical is pulled into the same system. The demand, the actual demand is actually manually updated into the system, so that at least they're at a point now where they're able to use some technology to trigger how much needs to be produced and when. But to your point, it never got to the point where it became the be-all end-all for drug accountability and reconciliation.
Right. And I think that'll be really challenging. I mean, I think at least for our system, we're trying to, have our IRT systems interfaced with SAP, which is, I think, also what BioMarin was working to do before I left. So I think that is really the key, because the IRT is, again, the true foundation for clinical, at least for clinical. And if you somehow connect the IRT to whatever other system you might have, whether it's Oracle or SAP, I think really that is the key, because then you will truly have clinical and commercial integrated.
I'd say I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if I was going to pick on Luke, but he's gone. So
You can pick on Scott. He's on.
okay, yeah, Scott. So now that you've been acquired by one of the big boys, tell me what it has been like going from a company that probably probably has gone from manual planning to being part of a larger organization that I'm assuming has some of their supply chain planning done in some sort of ERP system.
Yeah, so at 5 Prime, like Malou said, everything is Excel based. So a lot of manual forecasting, supply planning, and tracking of inventory that way. But within Amgen, as you can imagine, there's a ton of systems that they're using, and SAP is one of them. There's a separate forecasting tool that's also being used, and those are all integrated together. So that's kind of how they're doing it, and it requires a lot of different groups and a lot of resources, because for every single function there's a separate team that's kind of managing it, and specific team for just managing the data that goes into these systems. So that's really important to make sure that the data is accurate when the systems talk to each other. So that's probably like the biggest difference is you don't have as much flexibility and control as Excel. It's kind of very high level numbers that get put into these systems, and the ERP system does the rest. So I honestly haven't used any of these systems personally yet, so I can't really speak too much to that, but maybe next meeting I'll have a little more experience.
Oh, okay, thank you. Just out of curiosity, I know there's if we're working in an environment that is Excel to trying to catch up to a company that maybe is few years ahead in terms of the technology that they've been using, requires a steep learning curve just to kind of understand the basics of ERP and item masters and so on and so forth. Any thoughts on what it's going to take to get the clinical folks who have never been exposed to an ERP system to be able to understand the vision and the concepts that is ahead for them?
You're asking what it's going to take to have an Excel person move to an SAP system?
Yeah.
Maybe more interesting SAP training. I mean, all the
More interesting. So does that mean you're getting some, but it hasn't? It's been more tech talk for the techies than something that is.
I mean, it's really dry training for SAP, and it's a lot of different codes that you have to use to punch into the system just to see what your inventory is at certain times. Whereas someone who's used to Excel is kind of they know exactly where it is in the spreadsheet to go. So probably more of just educating them on how to be more proficient in the SAP system. I think that's the biggest thing. That's why most people, from what I'm seeing, are kind of staying out of the system because they already have what they need to know in their own spreadsheets.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So a common theme that I've noticed is that many companies don't select and implement an ERP solution till well into when their first or even fourth commercial product has been implemented. And some examples of that, I know if Luke was on the line, he's just, I know Insight has 3 or 4 commercial products. They're just starting to talk about implementation now. BioMarin was well into multiple commercial products before they started going into it. Kudos to Beijing for starting a little before their first product. And I know Ryan Mills, kudos to him for doing the same. I know he's driving, so I won't ask you, Ryan, unless you are able to comment on that.
No, I mean, I can speak to it a little bit, I think, Bill, because, after spending several years at Genentech, and we went through a transition from ClinApp, like first from spreadsheets to ClinApps, and then from ClinApps to planning in SAP. And I kind of caught the tail end of that transition. And now back to planning completely in spreadsheets at Denali and trying to take some of the lessons learned there. I think as far as the transition, going fully into a system, I think Scott made a lot of really good points. I think one of the smart things that we did is that we had multiple planners that were part of the project team that was working to implement SAP for planning. And we spent a lot of time talking through as many different scenarios as we could account for, because everybody knows the challenge of planning clinical trials and systems is the diversity, right? How do you sort of capture all of the unique nuances of, weight-based dosing or, variable enrollment rates or this strategy or that strategy. And so the team really spent a lot of time kind of fleshing those out, and then even more time teaching and practicing. And I think that's what Scott was getting at, is you have to get folks comfortable that the way that they're planning in their head and translating that to a spreadsheet, they can plan in their head and translate that to a system successfully, and that they'll get numbers on the back end that will make sense to them, and they know where to go to find all the information that they need. I think coming back now and planning in Excel again, it's really been about building really robust models, which on the one hand, you get the flexibility, and you can kind of update things in real time as information comes in. But I have found maintaining all of the information that you need, especially for larger, more complex studies, it's hard. There's no question.
So thanks for that, Ryan. So question on this is that I know that the company you're at today, it doesn't have a commercial product yet, and I'm assuming it's more than a year or two away from having a commercial product. With that said, do any of your planners have ERP planning experience?
Yeah, I mean, we're still a relatively small team, but it's something that I'm already thinking about. Even though we are probably I would say at least 2 or 3 years away from a commercial product. I think Malu's point is super well taken. And as we're starting to build out our team, I'm actively looking for folks who have commercial supply chain experience specifically, and even better if they've gone through, kind of that lived experience of clinical to commercial and can bring some of those lessons in-house. I think, to answer your question directly, I think yes, both of our, myself and the other planner on our team have experience planning in systems. We're trying to establish some foundational principles that will help make that transition a little bit easier down the road. Even if we're not looking to sort of go whole hog with an ERP system for, a while, there are still best practices that we can use from a planning perspective, from an inventory management perspective, that will set us up to more easily make that transition when the time comes.
Okay, interesting. So I'm sort of leading up to a question that I'm glad, Susan Bain, you're on the line to hear, because what I think I'm hearing and what I have also personally experienced is that for many, if not most, biotech companies that are in the pre-commercial stage, they're planning on Excel. They need to, sooner rather than later, start thinking about the processes they need to put in that make them ready for an ERP solution. And they therefore would benefit by having people within their organizations with commercial ERP planning experience. But with all the hundreds of companies that don't have a commercial product, there's not enough talent, if you will, for all these hundreds of companies to hire people with this type of experience, which means they either go without, or they need to train, or they need to recruit somebody from a high-tech company that might understand the ins and outs of how to plan on an ERP system, but don't know anything about how to plan a clinical study on Excel. So is there anything, Susan, that you can say that might help us address this need that we have?
Well, since probably 50% of our students have zero experience, excuse me, they're really on the ground floor. They're pretty adept with Excel spreadsheets, that's for sure. But we don't have access to some of these programs. I do, I've worked out a deal with the regulatory group with a company where we can get regulatory information and do regulatory strategy and intelligence, but I don't have access to any kind of program to use for training so that we could help out with that.
Bill, I have a comment. This is Brittany.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like my company, we were ramping up to commercial launch last year. And so I went through the whole thing of setting up an ERP system to get ready for commercial. But I would say that was less of the learning curve for us and just more so getting everyone accustomed to like an S&OP process and what that looks like, whether you have ERP or Excel. I'd say the more important part is how are you bringing all the different functions together on a monthly basis to reassess the forecast, the inventory, and align? Because when you're talking about it from a clinical perspective, it's pretty much just ClinOps, and now you're transitioning to like a sales team, and different feedbacks that you're getting on how things are going. And so I'd say that was more of a learning for us than just the ERP part of it.
Thank you, Brittany. Very helpful. And I think that's why JP mentioned this at the last meeting, is when one of the reasons we changed somewhat our focus on the real-time inventory initiative is that, originally we were focusing on figuring out how we get access to real-time information, which, to use his words, could be utopia for many of our members. So we're basically saying, our focus will be more on the processes, because if you don't have the processes, you won't be successful when you are ready to transition into a technology like SAP, Oracle, or whatever the case may be. But I'm assuming still that without having some presence within your organization of talent that has been exposed to an ERP system, having everybody come to the same vision when you are ready to migrate into that solution could become a challenge. So I was just curious and appreciate one thing that Ryan said, that that's one of the criteria that I think I heard you say, Ryan, that you're looking for when you're hiring planners now is, while it's helpful to have clinical experience and you want that person to have that, you're also hoping that they'll have some sort of systems experience on top of that. Are you finding that kind of talent out there on the market that you can hire?
It's tough. No question. Anybody who's been hiring recently knows clinical and commercial supply chain folks are in demand, and it's hard to find folks who have clinical and commercial, or big company and small company. Like, that's just, there's a lot of new companies out there that are hiring, and it's kind of a war out there right now to find good people.
Okay. I know we're running out of time, so any last comments or questions before we sign off? Okay, so again, thanks everybody for joining the call, and please let me know if you didn't receive the information about the 4G webinar on the 25th. And also, please give me your feedback on the website, because the more of us that starts using it, the more beneficial it will be for all of us. So again, thanks everybody. I'm going to sign off.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. So long.